Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Annette Mills. I'm going to be taking this session. We have a few people who are currently joining us, so we will just wait a couple minutes um, as everyone gets into the room. Okay, good morning. Looks like we are about there. Welcome to this session. Great to see a few people. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning to join us. The topic that I'm going to be sharing on today or speaking about today is on sharenting. So I'll talk about exactly what the concept is, but it really is about people and most often parents sharing images, news, videos about their children. And part of this session is just really to raise awareness of what some of the consequences can be. There are many good reasons why we share, but there are sometimes some consequences, and also to share some tips. So this is an introductory session. I don't go a lot into some of the privacy legislations and so on, or provisioning around protecting children, although I will just touch very briefly on what some countries are doing and what is also available in New Zealand. So, as I said, my name is Annette Mills. I'm a professor in information systems. So, information systems is about the use of computers in organizations. So, of course, one of my keen interests is looking at any sort of information data that is collected about anyone. Children, in particular, are quite a vulnerable group, and particularly young children, because very often they don't have a choice about what information is posted about them. So, this is what we're going to be looking at today. There are also a couple of other sessions within Privacy Week that touch on children, which, if this is a topic that you are very interested in, I do encourage you to go along to or to view the videos for some of those sessions. So let's get straight into the topic. Sharenting, children and privacy, the fine line between those cute pictures that we post, and when those cute pictures can become a concern. So, what is sharenting? So, sharenting is a term that is sort of an amalgam of the idea of sharing and parenting. So, this is when parents often habitually share news, images, videos of their children on social media. Now, this is not necessarily about posting on YouTube. It could be that we post images, pictures, those pictures that were taken at a birthday party, when you have a newborn, and so on. And often they may be posted on Facebook because, to be honest, it's one of the easiest ways of being able to share information today. Um, Parents are not the only ones who share information about children. Grandparents, other family, even friends will share information about your children. And perhaps you share information about other people's children. As we go through this session, I want you to think, have you ever shared an image of your child or perhaps another child? Or perhaps you know someone who has shared an image. Is it fine? Do you see any issues with that image? Or can you think, has there been an image that maybe I wish I didn't share that image? I'm fortunate enough to, or I'm not sure, fortunate or unfortunate, depends on your view, but I'm fortunate enough to grow up in an era where most of my photographs are still in albums. I have to sit down and actually scan all these photographs. What did that mean back then? We never took pictures of every single moment because each time you took a photo, you had to have the reel of film, you had to take it, get it processed, and so on. And there was a huge cost to it. And so often there was a lot of thought that went into what images were taken, who they were shared with, etc. But today, everything is instant. I was asked quite recently to take a picture of a group, and it went straight to a WhatsApp group. No editing, no pausing. So sometimes we also have that things are going straight out there and we're not thinking about it. So all these images, etc., that we share, they create or contribute to a child's digital footprint. And it gets attached to children without their consent. And we can ask, of course, should children be asked? And yes, they should be asked. Parents are the protectors of children, of their children, of any child. Any adult should be a protector of any child. However, the disclosures that they make, the information they share, and that of others, it could be harmful. And sometimes we might not think it is, but it could be. And we're getting into an era now with things like generative AI, where, for example, image manipulation is now very, very easy. Children are able to manipulate images of other children, and it is causing serious problems. And there is no opt out for children. Once an image has been posted, then that becomes a part of their permanent digital footprint. So let's talk a little bit about what a digital footprint is. So, a digital footprint is basically everything that we know about a person. We are increasingly being defined by our digital self, information that appears online. Think as adults, we may have a LinkedIn profile. We have email. We have all these other representations of ourselves online. And it is permanent. Every action, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's deliberate or unintentional, is stored and it becomes permanent. And what it means is relative to other footprints. So everything is going to be compared to everyone else. So you're not the only one, however, who contributes to your digital footprint. The rest of it is done by others. If an organization makes, for example, an inference about the things that you like, that can become a part of your digital footprint. Your friends, your family, anyone else who posts online, that becomes a part of your digital footprint and it becomes permanent. So many children today are growing up and they will discover that their digital footprint began in utero and didn't stop there. Think suddenly a new baby is going to be born and we start taking images when that child is still in the womb. And sometimes these images are posted as well. And this becomes um, a long term image that is out there. Once they're born, we post images of children, of that child, taking their first steps, going to school, all of these. And so this phenomenon is what has become known as sharenting, when parents, as I said, share pictures, videos of their children on social media. And I've given a link that goes through and explains this a bit more. So, what we're going to have a look at. We've introduced briefly the concept of sharenting. We'll talk a bit more about that. Why do parents share? We'll talk a little bit about the dark side of sharenting, the benefits, the harms. We will also touch on the children's privacy and the law, the Privacy Act. We'll look briefly at some protections that are in place or coming into place elsewhere and some suggestions. I will, of course, close off with some recommendations as well and tips for parents. And then we will conclude, and hopefully, we will have some time as well for some questions. What I'd also like very much is for you to have a think about incidents where you think this could raise a concern or this was a really good reason for sharing. And I would suggest posting them and sharing them in the Q&A section so that others can benefit. So let's perhaps make the session more interactive. So here are just some snapshots that I have taken from various articles. Today, children's privacy has become something that is at the fore. It is being looked at by UNESCO internationally and within New Zealand. And most recently, we had a webinar on Wednesday looking at the OPC's current campaign around children. So it points out how important children's privacy is. So there's a new report by the Human Rights Council that talks about maximizing children's privacy in the digital age, making sure that we act in their best interest and actively seek their views. More than 175,000 children are going online every single day. Okay. But what about posting about your kids? Could that damage them? These two articles came out of New Zealand sources. On average, parents post 1,000 images of their children online before they're old enough to have their own social media accounts. In fact, actually, studies are showing that by 2 years old, many children will have an online presence. But are we doing too much? This is something for us to think about. By 18, kids would have upwards of 70,000 posts. Okay, they themselves would have created many of these posts. And we add to that the posts that are created by parents, family, siblings, friends, all others. Have you ever taken a moment to have a look to see what's online about your child, about yourself? So, why do parents share? This makes a whole lot of sense. It's an easy way to keep family and friends updated. Some share because they want to build a positive media presence. In fact, some parents feel that it's important for their child to have a media presence from they're quite young because that will then help them later on in life. It helps to build positive networks. Some parents feel that it's their right to actually share their not only their life story, but because their children are a part of that life story, then they feel that it's part of their right to share that. It's also a way sometimes parenting can be challenging. And so, therefore, it's a way of receiving support. And so, many parents may go online into different forums. They may talk about some of the mental health challenges that they're going through with their children, okay, or things that their children are facing. But remember, this adds to their digital footprint as well. But it helps one not to feel alone when you're dealing with various issues. You can communicate with, obviously like-minded people. It's also a way of showcasing what individuals do as parents, their own successes. It's also a form of managing the impressions of other people. And then there is commercial sharing. This is where we come to things like social influencers who use their children as part of their profiles when they are sharing. And then there's a dark side. Okay, why do some parents share, and what do they share? So here I'm going to just tell you a few stories that I've come across. Okay, now in preparing for a session like this, I actually had a look at. I purposely was actually looking for moments where the sharing was not necessarily, perhaps in my opinion, the best choice or the best for a child. So often parents will share those really cute pictures. Okay, if we look at this image in the corner, I took a snapshot from YouTube where the kids were making funny faces. Okay, however, it's cute, it's funny. In fact, in one of the images a little later on, the kids looked a little bit upset. They were crying. Okay. Um, but how could this cause a problem? Well, later on, other kids could find these pictures and bully. This is one of the issues that comes up. Or take the actual images of your child and manipulate them and create memes. And then that causes problems for children. Some parents share those embarrassing moments because they think it might be kind of cute. Sometimes they share the frustrations of children. So I looked through some TikTok videos, and there was a particular social influencer, and she was carrying out actions that deliberately frustrated her child and was posting this on social media. So one of the videos showed this child. She was around maybe 2 or 3 years old. Mom comes along and she gives her a gift. She says, "Here's a gift for you. Here's a present." And of course, she's very excited. She goes and she sits down and she excitedly opens up this present. And in the present is a banana. Okay. She looks at the banana and she goes, "I don't want a banana." And mom says, "Oh, but bananas are so good for you." She goes, "I don't want a banana." And she starts to get upset.
and she starts to throw a bit of a tantrum. And all of this is just simply part of this particular parent's profile on social media. Now, there were comments that were made, and then some of these comments were saying, well, how ungrateful this child is for this gift. Other comments were more supportive of the child. I guess I wonder later on in life when this 3 year old becomes 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, is it going to be so cute then? A lot of organizations look at social media to understand kids, to understand the person that they want to hire. Would these images affect them later on in life? So there are those deliberate frustrations. Location. Be very careful about sharing locations. Personal information. You might think, well, I don't post that. But things like, for example, sharing birthdays. So, happy birthday, Amanda. We've got a name, we've got a date. Okay, but we also have perhaps the parents' details because it is posted under their profile. So, therefore, once we know the parent's name, we can often find the address, we can find the name of the child, we can find their date of birth, and many other things. Why does this matter? There are studies that are now showing that by about 2030, we can expect to have millions of children just becoming adults at 18 years old, finding that they have loans that they've taken out, that they have supposedly taken out. Okay, this is coming about because people are scraping this information, creating these huge databases. And when a child turns 18, they will open accounts for those children. They need only basic information, their name, date of birth, address. Many people don't change their addresses. Open up the accounts, make the first one or two payments, default on the loan, and suddenly this young adult finds that their credit rating is affected and they have loans that they didn't even take out. So there's a lot of personal information that can sometimes be extracted from these images and from what is shared. Okay, to boost following, I've mentioned social influences. Now, this is an interesting one, punishments. So please bear in mind that I was specifically looking for examples where sharenting was was part of punishment. So there was an example where there was a child, she was probably about 12 or 13 years old, and she had obviously misbehaved on the school bus. This was in the US. So her dad made her walk to school, and he drove behind her for the 5 kilometers or whatever it was to school, and she's walking ahead of him, and he's commenting. And he posted this video, perhaps a way of pointing out that, kids, you should not do this. This is what happens. That video went viral. When I looked at it a few months ago, it had over 19 million views. He did not expect that that video would go viral. And I guess I then wonder, what is that going to mean for that child when they see this later on? Now, at no point in time was the child's face shown. However, the parent's name is in the YouTube channel. Plus, once you have their name, there's also information about approximately where they live, and therefore you can find their address. And certainly in the US, this is very easy to find. There was another instance in which I can't recall exactly what the child did, but to punish her, the parent cut her hair off and videoed it and posted it. Okay. There were some It was not necessarily a consequence of this action, but I will put this on the table. That child committed suicide later on. It was never linked to this particular video. We can't say that that was the reason, but things were happening, and this is what happened. So sometimes we don't think about these things. So there are various times in which sharenting has been used to punish children. This is not encouraged, of course. Potential dangers. Okay, children lack control over how their images are used when parents make a decision about how they want to post images. So there's oversharing and violating of children's privacy. Study shows that at least 74%, and perhaps almost everyone in this particular webinar, will know a parent or can think of somebody who they feel overshares information about their children. And unfortunately, 8 in 10 parents will have followers who they do not know. Sharing sensitive information, particularly if it's something that a child may consider later on to be embarrassing or private, like, for example, information about their health, their performance in school, that can also compromise the child's trust in a parent. Oversharing, of course, has a lot of potential to do even more damage. We've talked about, for example, parents revealing identifying information about their child on social media, such as their name, home address, birth date, which hackers can then use later on. And it's enough to take out loans and start a credit history on their own. Some of the cute photos could be a problem later on when children grow up. Another consideration is whether or not the sharing is actually shaping the child's digital identity in a way that then affects how they shape their identities later on. It means basically, in summary, parents are determining what their children's identity looks like well before their child has started to think about it and even has an option to actually contribute or determine what that identity is like. Sharenting overexposes children to data brokers, gatherers, unwanted surveillance. What about digital kidnapping or physical stalking? What is digital kidnapping like? There have been instances where adults will claim images of children and pretend that that child is their own child. So it does make sense. Have a squiz now and again to see what is there online about your child. Identity theft, it's not just a problem for adults. Research is showing that 14% of US parents have said that their child has had their identity stolen. Cyberbullying, we've heard a lot about that. Embarrassing posts can not only create anxiety for children, but it can also provide ammunition for other children to engage in cyberbullying, emotional harms, online abuse. Um, with with generative AI and the ability to manipulate images, unfortunately, children are manipulating the images of other children, and it has become so easy. With generative AI, we have now taken people who are novices, and we now give them an intermediate level of expertise in being able to do this. Of course, you would say, well, Annette, haven't images been manipulated all the time? Sure, but we had to pay for it. You had to know who to ask. Now it's at the fingertips of everyone. So, should we ban sharenting? Okay, what's next? So, there are a few ways forward. I thought, well, first of all, let's have a look at the Privacy Act. Now, the Privacy Act does not apply when information has been disclosed in a personal capacity. There is one exception, okay? So if you want to have a look at the Privacy Act, there is an exception in Section 28, which could be used to address certain type of content which is considered inappropriate. However, that is quite limited. Otherwise, the Privacy Act does not apply. We can look at the Harmful Digital Communications Act. So that can be leveraged when the communication um, that has been posted is considered harmful. However, think of many of the pictures that we post that could be used to bully children. I'm very doubtful that many of them would fall under harmful digital communications or be covered within the limited purview of the Privacy Act. So we have to think more broadly. So, what are some recommendations that we could put forward here? Because, in fact, there's a lot of development that is going on overseas. In France, there has been an attempt to put forward and to ban Sharenting. So, there's an act that has been going through Parliament to look at that. I believe it's Denmark. has been looking at limiting the uses of educational technology when it comes to collecting information. And in the UK, there's a concerted effort to improve the provisioning around children's privacy. So, having looked at some of those things, here are just a couple of suggestions. A children's privacy commissioner. Is this an issue that is so important for us that perhaps do we need someone who actually focuses on this vulnerable group, our children, our young people? A privacy code, a children's privacy code that addresses the gaps that are within the Privacy Act. Having a right to erasure. This, of course, should apply more broadly, not only to children, but remember, children don't have a choice very often, especially young children, about what has been posted about them. So, a right to erasure could allow them to address those later on in life. A right to object. A right to object exists under the GDPR. Perhaps that is something that we also need to consider, not only for children, perhaps more broadly, and any other sort of provisions that we think are important, particularly to protect our children in this digital age. So, some recommendations, some next steps. My first and most important one is before you post, think before you post. Okay? Remember, children, your child, other people's child, have a right to privacy. So look ahead. I introduced the concept of the digital footprint at the beginning because I think it's very important. Everything that we post contributes to that digital footprint. So think about the digital footprint and think about whatever it is that you're doing, how does it affect your child's identity? Think about who is in your network, who is going to be able to see this, especially for children who could make a decision. And remember, this is not just about age, this is about maturity and so on. Ask permission. If they object, well, um, if they object, then I think we should look very carefully at that. Okay. Check your privacy settings. Apply the strongest privacy settings, particularly around posts about your children, and monitor them. Okay, do not set and forget. Okay, because very often things change. So go back and check. Always read the privacy policies before you share information. And don't disclose details that are not needed, even when it's asked for. And parents are not the only ones who post information about their children. So have open conversations with others about what is appropriate, what you think is okay to post, about what your child is happy for that to be posted. Some further tips, okay? You could set up alerts to see whether your child's name appears in a Google search result. Check who are your followers. As I said earlier, 8 out of 10 parents will have followers who they have never met. So think about that when you post information or things about your children to even your Facebook page. So if you have followers who you've never met, then even setting the privacy settings to the strictest level does not eliminate them being able to see what has been posted. Be careful when sharing your child's location. Ideally, don't share it. Okay. Once your child is old enough, allow them to veto and to have a say in what you can and cannot post. This has been a very tricky area because very often parents may feel, well, actually, I have a right to post and to share information about myself, and that includes my child. So I think everyone needs to think about, I'm not here to say yes or no, but I think this last item actually makes a lot of sense. When they're old enough, allow them to veto and to have a say. Okay. And think again very carefully about what it is that you are posting. This is an important one. Be careful about the pictures that you post. Okay. Do not, I'd like to say, do not, okay, share pictures of your child in any state of undress with their mouths open in their underwear or in a swimsuit. Don't post pictures that are suggestive, even if you think it's cute and funny. Unfortunately, there are people out there who do horrible things with images of children. Okay. And think anything that you share has the potential to go viral. That parent who shared that video of his daughter walking to school did not expect it to go viral. So think before you post, okay? And it's not only your child, think about other people's children as well. So be careful when posting pictures or information about other children. And always, always pause and think before you post. One of the issues is that we never know where things are going to end up, okay? So I'm going to tell you a small story that I came across. Now, for for most of this posting that's going on and most of the things around social media, it's a relatively new phenomenon, but it's increasing. So we really don't know what it's going to be like, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. It's going to be probably a very completely different world. Now, this is not exactly an example of sharenting, but it illustrates what can happen. So here's a child. Her name was Mariana. Okay. Mariana's image, her photograph, was originally taken without her consent during a medical examination. So this was long before the internet existed. Okay. And by the way, Mariana is not her real name. Okay. So soon after that, it was published in the medical journal. Okay. And her story appeared in newspapers and magazines at the time. But remember, at that time, there was no internet. And so, therefore, you had to have access to that newspaper, that magazine, that medical journal. Most of us will not read a medical journal. So it seemed to make sense then. However, decades later, it was put when that image appeared online, it went viral and took on a life of its own. It was viewed millions of times, making it difficult for her to be left in peace. Okay. A reporter followed her up, and all she wanted to do was basically for it to be forgotten and for her to be left alone. Her story is a cautionary tale of what happens or the consequences of failing to remove harmful content from the internet in her particular case, but as we look forward, of failing to think about what is posted. Now, today, we probably wouldn't post an image, okay, of very young children standing completely naked, etc. But we post other images. Unfortunately, with generative AI, you can take images of children, adults, anyone, and say to the AI system, make these changes. And you can think through what those changes may be. It's not just simply tweaking a face, an image. It can be changing what somebody's wearing, changing their context, or even, I'm sorry, removing what they're wearing. It's a very, very challenging world. So, almost in closing, children have a right to privacy, and they have a right to be protected. And as adults, as parents, as grandparents, as guardians, we have a very important role to play in that. So thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. Okay, so somebody has asked, how can we get social media companies to remove photos if they were accidentally shared or uploaded, especially when their contact details are non-existent or extremely hard to find? Um, this is a very good question. I don't have a very good answer for that one. I think this is where we can look at things like, for example, legislation. In New Zealand, we do not have a right to erasure or a right to be forgotten. This is part of the provisions under the GDPR. Now, this particular provision came up in the case in Spain where someone had information that had been posted about them legitimately. They had been in a bankruptcy case and so on. But of course, years later, even though All of what they had done in the past had been removed. Whenever people searched, it kept coming up. And so this was a sort of incident that was behind the driving force of provisions such as the right to erasure. And so I would probably suggest here, this is why I included it as a recommendation, that perhaps we do need to have a right to erasure so that we can get social media companies, Google, etc., to remove photos afterwards. Okay, what about posting family pictures with children in them? Again, here, I'm not here to say whether you should. I think I think it is that fine line, okay, between what we post. We're moving into a very different world today, um, and so therefore, it's a hard question to answer. Should it be yes? Should it be no? What is sharenting? We talk about the oversharing, and someone asked me once, is that about sharing a lot of pictures? What if it's just one image? We don't know. So I would say the best thing is to think before we share. And perhaps in terms of sharing and these images, yes, perhaps continue on Facebook, but make sure and do check those those privacy policies and ensure that persons who are in your network that they know what your values are. Ask them not to reshare those images, etc. I'm just looking through the next one. I agree. It comes down to trust. Okay. If photos and videos are posted in a closed group that is trusted, do I see any risks with this? I go back to your first comment. It comes down to trust. Sometimes people in a closed group, they think, oh, this is pretty cute. And they share it with someone else. And then you lose control. So I think that this is where it is important that people within our networks know what our values are and what is important. Should New Zealand follow the same path as the EU and implement the GDPR? When we look around, we see that other that that other jurisdictions, for example, Australia, is reviewing its Privacy Act, and so therefore I am going to say yes. I think that we need to relook what what the gaps are, perhaps in in the Privacy Act, and look at some of the provisions. The world is changing rapidly. The Privacy Act implemented in 2020 was based on a number of submissions that were made years earlier. Things have changed a lot, and so therefore there are gaps. For example, in our current Privacy Act, there are two main rights that are conferred: the right to access information and sorry, I'm just missing the other one right now. The right of access and the right to correct. In the GDPR, there are other rights: the right to erasure, the right to object. They provide seven rights: the rights to not be subject to automated decision making, and so on. So these are important. And so, yes, I think that we should look at our Privacy Act and see where the gaps are. And this, importantly, too, is where, with the current campaign around children, it provides an opportunity for us to think very seriously: do children need special protection? I would submit that they do. It's a vulnerable group. If we look at the current Privacy Act, there's no specific provision around children except in one particular provision, which is around the fair posting of information. Um, so we do need to look at it. Do you think the remit for Children and Young People's Commission could be expanded to include children's privacy rights? Um, I'm going to say that perhaps it could be, but I guess we have to think, where do we want to really delve into the issue of children's privacy rights? Should that fall under the Privacy Act, or should it fall under something else? And perhaps one of my concerns with expanding the remit of other groups to include privacy rights is that we'll leave out something that is important. And so, therefore, this is a question that we could ask. Should we strengthen the Privacy Act and then have other things such as the Children and Young People's Commission Act and so on, then defer to the provisions within the Privacy Act? And also under the Privacy Act, we could have a code that is specific to children. So it's not a yes or no answer, but I think we have to be careful to ensure that we're not missing things that are important. Early childhood education centers posting photos of children on a public page. Now, that's an important one as well. I think here, one of the things that has come up is have they asked permission? So that is the very first thing. Now, asking for permission, asking for consent, that's a whole nother issue. Do we ask for consent for each photo or each event? Or is it a broad sweeping consent that is given at the beginning? As a parent, when your child is enrolled in one of these centers, do you give permission at the beginning that says any and all photos can be posted? I I think this is something that needs to be looked at. What is consent, and at what level should it be? Should it apply? Are single pictures to a single person on WhatsApp safe rather than on social media? Relatively safe. WhatsApp does say that things are encrypted. However, um, and this one here, I'm not absolutely certain about. At one stage, when you changed your device and you attempted to move your posts, your images, etc., to a new device, when you upload it, it became unencrypted. And then when you downloaded it back to the other device, of course, it was encrypted. When I attempted to do that a few years ago, I had to do it via Google. So there goes your question. If you look at Google's privacy policy, I guess I was asking myself the question, when I did this, that information had to be stored on Google. Was it deleted when I moved it back down to my new device? So are single pictures to single person safe rather than social media? I would say it's safer, but again, it goes back to trust as well. Um, do I notice different generations having different approaches and views? I haven't done any studies on this in particular, but my guess is that for generations that have grown up in a situation in a context in which social media, um, being online, etc., is so much a part of who we are, it's almost as though surveillance or being watched or being online is part of everyday life. I grew up in a place where that wasn't the case. And so therefore I think a lot about this. I personally do not have a Facebook page. I have LinkedIn, but no Facebook. So I think, yes, that different generations will have different approaches and different views. I would encourage anyone who's really interested in this subject to actually look at YouTube. There's some really good videos and there's some good articles online about it. Here's a tip. Okay. There's apps that exist which essentially cloud storage, which allow you to add and invite people. It's a good way to share photos with close family. Very good tip. Yes, please, everyone, have a look at this tip. So sharing it via cloud storage rather than posting it on social media sites. I'm going to also add to that. Um, Facebook had a major data breach in 2018, which was not notified until 2021. In that data breach, 1 in 5 persons, that is 20% of all Facebook users, had their accounts breached. Now, it could then suggest, well, if people could hack into your account, then what does that mean? So be careful when we post. It's not just simply about those privacy settings. It's about what could get out there. Okay, so here's another one. My son's teacher has a TikTok account, posts videos of the class with her teaching experiences. They're short, but they do feature faces. She shares them. She shares these videos to the class Facebook page. I'm uncomfortable. I did not consent to this. Surely it's separate to our privacy forms we completed for the use of photos for the school as a whole. Would you advise I talk to her and the leadership of the school? I would advise that you do talk to her and the school as well about it. I would definitely advise that you do that. The next comment, I don't think it matters if it's a closed group. Social media companies allow others to scrape information from profiles. Um, yes, they do. When you read the privacy policy, and this is where I really encourage you to read the privacy policy. When we upload information to social media platforms such as YouTube, as Facebook, and so on, then have a look. They can use that information. Now, when it talks about scraping information, there has been a lot around that. For example, um, can information uploaded for one person be scraped and used for another person? And this came up in the case around the U.S. elections, where the Cambridge Analytica case, where data was scraped from Facebook profiles. Um, so certainly that is a big issue, and social media companies need to be taken to task. There are efforts to say, well, can we actually say that children need to be protected? And I think that this is a good place to be. Okay, great case for having a children's information privacy code. Yes, thank you very much. Please, if there's any further consultations, put in your submissions. Is there any legal provision for the children of these social influencers to access their earnings, considering they're essentially the product in the scenario? I hope this will lead to a decrease in the exploitation of these social influencers. So for social influences where it's a commercial matter, that would fall under labor laws. So that's outside the scope of this particular presentation. So we'd have to see what provisions, for example, in New Zealand, do we have through, for example, labor laws as far as social influences that are earning and using this for commercial purposes. This is exactly what France also is trying to attempt to address. They are addressing the commercial aspects of labor laws, but they're also were attempting to address other aspects through their Sharenting app. Excellent suggestion here. Family Album is a great app. It's exactly for this reason. Okay, thank you very much for the last comment. Okay, presenting on this topic. So thank you, everyone. We're just about at the end of our session. I just want to say thank you for all the comments, all the questions. If you would like to discuss any further, I could easily be found at the University of Canterbury. My email address is annette.mills@canterbury.ac.nz. I am also currently the convener of the Children's Privacy Working Group under the Privacy Foundation for New Zealand, where we advocate for the privacy rights of New Zealanders, and especially for our group, where we are looking especially so at what is happening in the States for children. The good news is children's privacy is at the forefront. And so, therefore, we do hope that there will be changes. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.